going. Scholars are human beings, and very often they would like to avoid the commitment that Jesus Christ calls for, and he just does. You read the canonical Gospels, and if you take them seriously, then you have to do something about Jesus. But again, if the non-canonical Gospels can provide us with a way out, you don't have to take somebody seriously if there's no single reliable account of who he is and what he calls us to. And the Gospel of Thomas, for instance, which we're going to get into seriously, I promise, it calls for that. It calls for a very serious assessment of Jesus, what he means and what he calls us to in terms of our heart commitment and in terms of our life. Okay, so let's go. Oh, but let me just say this. Christianity is a historical religion. It just is. Let me give you two quotations. One of them, I can't remember who it's from. The other one, I can remember who it's from, and I'm not going to tell you who it is because it's a public video. The first one is, Christianity has appealed to history it must go. And that, of course, is a paraphrase of the Roman official saying that Paul had appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar he must go. That makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense because Christianity does appeal to history. It says this is a historical religion. The redemption that we're talking about is not redemption out of this world, but one that took place because our God became part of this world, because he became a true human being. And so redemption is something historical. Christianity appeals to history, and to history it must go. So we want to take that seriously. We want to explore the history and see where it takes us. Okay? The other is this: the truth is tough. The truth is tough. And I had a professor who said that, and I was really excited by it then, and I'm really excited by it now. The truth is tough. The truth is not something to be frightened of. The truth is not something to be to avoid. It's something to embrace. So let's see where the truth takes us. All right, the major contenders. Here's a list. Here's a short list. I gave it to you in the handout that I emailed around. Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, Secret Gospel of Mark, Achmim Gospel, Gospel of Peter, Apocryphon of James, Dialogue of the Savior, Gospel of the Hebrews, Gospel of Nazareans, Protovangelium of James, Oxyrhynchus, Papyrus 840, Oxyrhynchus, Papyrus 1224, Edgerton Gospel, and Fayum Fragment. The Fayum Fragment. Now that sounds good, doesn't it? Kind of like the Edgerton Gospel. We're only going to look at one in depth, and that is the Gospel of Thomas. Why? Tremendous popular appeal. Like I may have mentioned earlier, Elaine Pagels, who is a prominent scholar, popularized this with a book, Beyond Belief, a number of years ago. It's been very influential in reviving interest in ancient Gnosticism. There is kind of a revival. It's sort of cool to be into Christian Gnosticism these days. I remember a student, University of Texas at Austin student, talking about this when we were stuck together in a bus shelter in Erie, Pennsylvania years ago. This is weird. It's kind of cool to be into Christian Gnosticism because, again, it gives you an alternative take on Jesus. It gives you a Plato Jesus that you can kind of mold into the kind of Jesus that you want him to be. And so the Gnostic Jesus does not call you to a life of radical obedience. He doesn't call you to specific kinds of obedience that you don't like maybe sexual fidelity. He doesn't call you to a heart commitment to God alone through Jesus Christ alone. He doesn't call you to all of these things that make you uncomfortable. And so it's kind of cool to be Gnostic. It sounds cool, doesn't it? I mean, it's even got a silent G. G-N-O-S-T-I-C. Gnostic. I'm a Gnostic. All right, anyway. It's heavily leaned on by some scholars. A couple of important ones. John Dominic Crossan. And you can't actually watch a PBS special about Christianity or about the origins of Christianity without running into John Crossan. He's an ex-monk who has written a number of books about the origins of Christianity and is very, very suspicious of the canonical accounts. It's also relied on by James Patterson, Helmut Koester, who's professor emeritus at Harvard Divinity School. Smart guy. Ran into some of his work years ago. And it's probably the most complete extra-canonical gospel that we have in terms of both its length and the fact that we have multiple translations of it. We have copies of it in both Coptic and Greek. And let me tell you about those. The Coptic copy, and we said it's not copy cop, which is the copy store, it's a Coptic copy. And Coptic is an ancient Egyptian language that lasted up into the Middle Ages. And there are any number of texts that have been written in Coptic. It remains as the church language for the Coptic Orthodox or Monophysite Church. The Coptic copy of the Gospel of Thomas that we have was discovered in 1945. It was discovered as one of 13 leather-bound codices, which are books, not instead of a scroll, you have a book form, in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. And they're dated to around 350 to 380. So, okay, really interesting find. Tells us all kinds of things about Gnosticism, but not in itself, something that sort of poses a threat to the supremacy of the canonical Gospels. Until two things were realized. First of all, very quickly scholars realized that a Gospel of Thomas is mentioned in some church documents by some of the early church fathers and letters and things that they wrote in the 200s and 300s as being around. So this all of a sudden becomes interesting. Gospel of Thomas. Well, we found a Gospel of Thomas. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe this dates back to earlier than 350. Maybe into the 200s. Well, if in the 200s, maybe it goes back even earlier than that. And then this was the additional thing that scholars discovered. They realized that what they were looking at in the Coptic language was a complete copy of something they already had fragments of in the form of papyri. We talked about the papyrus paper, and how many papyrus fragments were preserved in Egypt because of the low humidity. They realized that they were identical. There were some papyri that were actually fragments of the Gospel of Thomas in Greek that had been found in Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, back during the 1890s. So then it got interesting because now you have multiple languages. John Dominic Crossan dates, he has the earliest date. He believes that the Gospel of Thomas actually dates back into the middle of the 1st century, which would make it a contemporary of Mark. Ooh, now it starts to get a little hairy, right? Early independent witness to Jesus? Maybe. So let's look into it. What can we find out? And I won't take all your evening. I know you want to sit around and look at the snow and drink hot chocolate, and I do too. What gives us actual clues as to the origins and the provenance, which means where it comes from, and also the dating of the Gospel of Thomas? A couple things. First of all, what does it say? All right, you're gonna love this. I'm gonna read to you from the Gospel of Thomas. So check it out. All right, it's in this Lost Christianity. Oh no, it's not in this. It's in Lost Scriptures. Books that did not make it into the New Testament. Okay, so check it out. Listen to what the Gospel of Thomas sounds like. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke and which Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down. And he said, whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. Jesus said, let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished and he will rule over the all. Jesus said, if those who lead you say to you, see, the kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. Jesus said, the man in olden days will not hesitate to ask a small child, 7 days old, about the place of life, and he will live. For many who are first will become last, and they will become one and the same. Jesus said, recognize that what is in your sight, and that which is hidden from you will become plain to you. For there is nothing hidden which will not become manifest. And I'll stop and give it a pause.